Well, let's go ahead and get started. Again, I think I've spoken with several of you before, but just by way of very brief introduction, I'm Justin Shepard. I'm the Vice President of ErgoScience. Um, I am still a practicing physical therapist. I've been working in the work comp industrial rehab realm for a little bit more than 2 decades now. I'm becoming an old physical therapist. Um, but this is the part of the job that I really like. I ran clinics for a really long time. All my clinicians would groan when I walked in to a new clinic because they're like, "Oh, he's going to talk about work comp again." Um, that was my thing. I like to talk about. So I like doing these things where I know at least you have some interest in work comp because you're on the webinar. Um, so the the webinar today is about the new ErgoCloud PWPE system. Again, I think several of you I've talked to about it previously. This is going to be kind of a brief overview, give some of the highlights. Um, if anybody has specific questions, feel free to jump in. Um, and we'll go through it. It'll probably take a half hour or so to go through the slides, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A or specific use cases if you guys want to chat about that. So how did we get started with this? ErgoScience was started by Deborah Lechner. This was about a little bit more than 30 years ago. Deborah is also a physical therapist. She was a professor at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. They were doing research on kind of the idea around if you're treating a patient in a clinic that's been injured on the job, and you're trying to get him back to work, and you're watching him do a specific task for a few minutes in the clinic, how do we extrapolate that and say, because what I watched in the clinic looks safe, I think he can do this on a job site for 8 hours a day or 40 hours a week? And so as she started looking around, there was nothing out there literature wise or current FCE wise that had that information. All of it was anecdotal. There was nothing that was really research based that showed that information. And so Deborah put together a team there at UAB, a few other physical therapists, psychologists, some vocational rehab people, and they started developing a scoring algorithm basically that would objectify the process of watching somebody perform a task for a brief period of time and then have the ability to predict their ability to perform that over a much greater time. So it took her about 5 years worth of research to finally get everything put together. Once they did have all of their research put together, they published it in the Journal of Occupational Medicine. Since that time, it's been peer reviewed and published on multiple occasions. We've trained, according to this, over 10,000 clinicians in the US and 17 other countries. This needs to be updated because I know at this point we're up to about 3,000 clinics providing the FCE or pre-hire testing in the United States. So it's probably over 10,000 clinicians as well now. Just of note, we've never had a successful legal challenge to our scoring algorithm, to the FCE product, which should be of some comfort to most physical therapists. Just as a side note, and I guess I don't know everybody on here what your level of expertise is with FCEs, if you've done a lot of them before, if this is new to you, or even work comp in general. When I would speak with young therapists, one of their fears about doing a lot of work comp was that, oh, I'm going to get dragged into court. They're so litigious that I'm going to go to court and I'm going to have to answer stuff. It's going to be really uncomfortable. I did the majority of my treatments for 20 years were work comp. I went to court, I think 3 or maybe 4 times, and I actually only had to sit on the stand 1 time in my whole career. So the actual odds of you being subpoenaed and having to go testify in court are really, really slim. But if you do, it's nice to be able to say, this is not my opinion, what you're asking me about. This has been peer reviewed and tested by a lot of people that have done a lot more research than me, and there's never been a successful legal challenge over it. So basically that research turned into the company ErgoScience. So we actually still pay a small royalty to the University of Alabama at Birmingham for certain tests that we do because it was developed while she was working there. We've been going for 30 years, a little bit longer than 30 years. Since the implementation of the FCE product, it was first paper-based, and then it went to the local installation where most clinics would just have the software on one computer in their office. If that computer broke down or the battery died, you were kind of hosed. And so we ran that way for several years. And now the latest iteration, obviously, is what we're presenting on today. And that is a cloud-based version of the system. So you can put it on any computer because it's just a web page. You know, one of the previous limitations was that it was only for PC or IBM compatible. You could not use Apple-based machines. Now you can use Apple, you can use PC, you can do it on a tablet. You could probably even do it on your phone. I wouldn't recommend it. It'd be a whole lot of finger swiping and typing, and it would be inefficient, but you could do it. So that's the latest iteration. It's much more functional, much easier to use. We're super happy with the product as it's turned out. As Christian mentioned before, there's been a lot of trial and error that has gone into it. We are physical therapists. We're not software engineers or developers, and so it's been a little bit of trial and error to get this new version out. But it's ready, it's done, it's working well, so we're super happy about it. So some of the things that we found with the original FCEs, and some that are still out there, it was a very subjective process. Without an objective scoring algorithm, FCEs could be a very subjective process. So for example, you're watching somebody, maybe you have a job description for somebody and it says that they have to be able to squat frequently. And that's based on the Dictionary of Occupational Titles, that from 1 to 33% is occasional, from 33 to 66 is frequent, anything higher than 66% is constant. And so this guy's job description says that he has to be able to squat frequently. And so you're watching him perform the squatting task in a clinic setting. How do you know whether he can do that occasionally or frequently? Like, what's your cutoff? What are the signs that you're looking for that would say, yeah, I think he's safe, or no, I don't think he's safe? So when we started developing this, there was really poor reliability and validity. Basically, there was none. It was pretty anecdotal. And if you went to court with that, they would question you about the same things. It was really based on examiner's opinion of, I think that he can do this for 40 hours, or I don't think that he can. The other side of things was that report writing could be very time consuming. And when I first started performing FCEs more than 20 years ago, it was all handwritten. We had a little bit of an outline that we would use, but everything was handwritten. So while the testing might take me 4 hours, the actual report writing would take me at least that long, and typically a lot longer than that. And even at the end of that, when I got done with the actual testing and I wanted to write up the report, I was pretty much just giving my opinion on what his work capacity, overall level of work. You know, is this guy very heavy, medium, light, sedentary? Can he do it for a full 40 hours? There were just a lot of things that I was writing into that report that were my opinion. And it took me a long time to write up the report and include everything that needed to be on there and make it look halfway decent for the referral source, either the case manager or the physician, surgeon, whatever the case might be. So along with the scoring system that Deborah developed, so again, this is just kind of review, but it's university-based research. It's been published and peer-reviewed. It's legally defensible. It's objective, so you're never putting in, like, this is my opinion. The report you can print out in about 15 minutes, typically, after the person leaves the clinic. Now it comes out as a Word document, so you still have the ability to write in anything that you want. You can, give a little bit of color commentary. If there were some things that you saw that you wanted to comment on, you can certainly write those things in there. But the report comes out as soon as you get done with the last test. the things that it has on that report when it comes out are, like I said, overall level of work. So that's according to the Dictionary of Occupational Titles. Sincerity of effort, and that's one that every case manager, every employer wants to know, was this, did the person give a full effort? Now, big sticking point in FCEs, anytime that you're doing something work related, um, there's some different terms that sometimes get thrown around, malingering, things like that. Just a bit of a word of caution: never write that into something, because malingering is actually a psychological term, and if you were to write that on a report, I think the patient was malingering, or I think they weren't giving a full effort, or I think they could have tried harder. I don't think they were doing their best. Anytime you put I think, I feel, my opinion is, a plaintiff attorney will tear that to shreds when you get on the stand. In our report, the sincerity of effort is still objective. It's built off of different criteria, scoring criteria that you put in based on objective data that you will put into the software, and it does that scoring for you. And finally, of course, the tolerance for full-time work. At the end of the test, you'll get something saying either it's safe for this person to perform this for a 40-hour work week, or at this point, this person still can't do this or they probably shouldn't do this for a 40-hour work week. And then it's up to you as a clinician to work with the referral source to say, maybe we want to do work conditioning, or maybe we need to make some accommodations, or maybe there's light duty this person could go to. But the report will already score that for you. So one of the new things with the software, um, you guys can unmute for a second. How many people on here have used the previous version of the software?
I've used it for quite a few years.
Okay. Anybody else besides Christian? Okay. So previously, once you went through all the intake information, you would go directly into the testing, and all of the tasks were there available for you. And anything that you didn't want to use, if it didn't pertain to that person's test, or you didn't need to use that piece of data, you would go in and you mark it as not tested. Or if there were a group of tests that you didn't need coordination or fine motor skills, you could mark all of those tests as not tested. Um, we've changed that up a little bit now to where before you go into the actual testing, you can, if you have a good job description available to you, you can actually mark the things ahead of time that you would like to test. So you don't have to, at the end of the test, you don't get to a point where you're finishing and it's saying you haven't completed the test, and then you have to kind of go back through and figure out which of these things did I not mark as untested that I meant to. Sometimes that could be time consuming. So now you choose ahead of time what tests or what tasks you want to perform during the testing, and those are the ones that will populate when you get to the actual testing software. And it just makes it a whole lot more convenient. So with the ErgoCloud FCE, it's a lot more flexible. So the software can be used for either non-specific job or non-job specific FCE. So that would be in the case that you have somebody who's been injured on the job, but they're probably not going back to the same job where they got injured. And so you're just trying to find out what are their max abilities, what can they do, what type of work could they do. Maybe they're staying in the same industry, but not with the same company. Maybe they're not even choosing to stay in the same industry, or maybe they don't even know what they can do. And so you can just test that person to their max abilities. So you would just let them, lift until they can't lift, till you deem it unsafe. Push pull, repetitive mobility stuff. You would just let them go until they can't do it anymore, and you would find out what their max abilities are. You can do a job specific FCE. So that's if this person was injured on the job, they plan on going back to that same position, and we just want to make sure that it's safe for them to go back. And so then you would have a job description in hand before you start the test, and you would enter in that information. This person has to lift, 60 pounds from floor to waist, 30 pounds from waist to eye level. They have to push with this much force, pull with this much force. They have to do this many rungs on a ladder. They have to squat occasionally or free, you would have all of that information. And so you would input it, And then on the test, you would only test to those abilities. You wouldn't have to go to max abilities. So two big differences there. Some of the things that we plan on putting into the software in the future will be a pre-hire physical abilities testing portion. And so it would just give a very reduced, kind of like a mini FCE. If somebody wants a job, we would either assist a company with putting together the testing, or maybe you already have something developed, you know what task somebody needs to do, and so you would put that into the software, and you would just do a 4 or 5 item test on somebody, and it would come out in a very brief format, like a 1-page format, saying yes, this person is safe to do that job, or no, this person shouldn't do that job. Same thing with the return to work testing. So if anybody that does a lot of work comp, I would hope that this is something that you do very frequently. If you've ever looked at any of my other material, we have a training course on doing work conditioning, on general work comp skills. One of the things that I hammer a lot is that anybody who is treating work comp patients should be providing the referring physician with a return to work test. Almost every patient. And that's just so that when that doctor is making his final determination of whether it's safe to send that person back to work, they're not guessing. And a lot of times that's what they do if they don't have some return to work documentation. So without that, then the doctor brings the person in, and maybe they had a shoulder injury and you've been treating them for a shoulder injury. And at this point, the person has, full range of motion and 5 out of 5 strength. And so the doctor says, okay, yeah, you can go back to work. Well, what if that person has to lift like 80 pounds from floor to waist level, or they have to lift 60 pounds up to eye level? Just because somebody has 5 out of 5 strength in their right arm and they have good range of motion certainly does not mean that they can lift 60 pounds overhead. So if the doctor doesn't have return to work documentation, they might be sending that person back to work too early, and then they could possibly get re-injured once they get back on the job site. With a return to work document, you would put that person through, maybe same thing as a physical abilities test, the 4 or 5 most physically demanding things that they have to do on the job. You watch them do that in the clinic, and then you send that documentation to the physician before that final visit with the patient and the doctor. The doctor looks at that piece of paper and says, okay, John Doe, I see that you did the most difficult things on your job safely. You're great to go back to work. Or maybe it reads, you attempted these things, but I see that there's still 2 of these physically demanding tasks that you can't do safely yet. So again, maybe we put you into some work conditioning. Maybe we have to make some job accommodations, but it takes the guesswork out of it for the physician. So if you're not doing that at this point, it's a great marketing tool to get more physicians, more case managers interested in your services. So that will be included in the software coming up. And then we're also building a work conditioning module. This will mostly be for maybe either younger therapists or inexperienced with work comp, who aren't quite sure how to set up a work conditioning program. And it will be designed such that how much time you have. So maybe you've been approved for 2 weeks of work conditioning. You have a job description, so you know what that person has to be able to do to go back to work, and you know what their baseline is because you've been working with them. So you input that information, and the software will help you create a work conditioning program based on the number of weeks and where that person has to get to. Um, it will just make it really easy for people who aren't experienced with work conditioning. So that stuff is all to come. But we're excited for that as well. So a couple of the things with the scoring. So we already talked about some of the scoring for, the overall level of work. So you get the test back or the report back, and it says this person can do either very heavy, medium, light, or sedentary work. And that's just based off how much can they lift during the push pull, floor to waist to eye level, bilateral carry, single-handed carry. That information, that stuff is kind of easy to look at. And in fact, I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. I'm actually going to bring up the software and walk you through a couple of screens so you can see how the scoring works for those of you who are not familiar with it. So give me 1 second here. just gotta log back in. It kicked me out,
Well,
which
then the
it's supposed to
security
do.
feature's working, right?
Yeah,
That's
I was just saying it's supposed to kick me out. If I let it sit for very long, then it puts you out and then you have to sign back in. One of the things, one of the main reasons why we actually developed the new software is that the security for the old software just wasn't up to snuff anymore. We work with a lot of companies. One of the big asks, especially for hospital systems anymore, is for things to be like really tight security wise. And so that's one of the big changes that we made here. So the security is really substantial on this. In my opinion, somewhat annoyingly substantial, but that's what everybody wants it to be, is make sure that only you can access your information. And so it is set up that way that only you can access your information. So let me share my screen again here. And again, as I'm going through this, if you have specific questions about any of the scoring protocol or testing procedures, anything like that, go ahead and stop me. Did I share the right screen, Joshua?
Yep, you're showing the walking mobility
Okay,
section.
perfect. All right, so for the scoring in the software, you don't ever have to manually score anything. Like the software does all the scoring for you. One of the things that we found are that people are prone to errors. Not that everybody makes errors when they're doing math, but I know a lot of people, if you're anything like my mother or a couple of my daughters, maybe math is not the strongest thing in your quiver. And so we try to take that issue away so the software does all of the scoring for you. So just for example, in this case, you can see up here that it's showing for what we input here that this person's overall level of work for walking would be never. And that's just according to what we put in here. So if we start playing with some of these parameters, so the distance you're supposed to walk for our test is 500 feet. This person only completed 150 of those feet. So if we change that to 500 feet, now the frequency is frequent. If we put in here that the person walked 200 feet, but didn't have, much deviations, it switches it back to frequently. And if we put that their pain score was maybe like a 7 out of 10 while they were walking, now it's occasional. So I'm just doing that to show that you don't have to be careful with, oh, how am I going to keep track of, is this person never occasional, frequent, or constant? The software does that for you. And it's like that with all of the mobility tasks. We can switch over. Let me cancel that so it doesn't save that information. We can switch over to position tolerance. We'll do something more interesting than sitting, let's say for squatting. Okay, I haven't tested squatting on this guy, so that will actually be interesting. So we'll put on here that we are going to test this, and we'll say that this person squatted for 5 minutes. His heart rate got to 105. We'll say that his pain after a minute was 1, his pain after 3 minutes was 3, and his pain after 5 minutes was 7. Now, I'll just stop there. So we had something flash up that's saying that this is kind of inconsistent results. Now, that does not mean that this person is cheating or lying. It's just saying, wait a second, look at this closely, because there could be some inconsistencies here. The reason that it's showing up as inconsistent is that I have this person at a 7 out of 10 pain, but that I have his quality of performance is still within normal limits. So that's saying he's not doing anything to show that he's in any pain at all. And as clinicians, all of you know that if somebody has 7 out of 10 pain, typically in their low back or in their knees when they're squatting, they would be shifting around a little bit, and those things are listed down here. You know, maybe they have, you know, they have excessive hip abduction and external rotation. That's a really common one on the squat task. They swing that one leg, the up leg, out a little bit. Maybe they're having difficulty balancing. So if we were to change this and say, okay, at 7 out of 10 pain, this person does have moderate deviations, and they're showing, you know, they're supporting all their weight through their up leg. They keep adjusting their position due to pain. So now it's saying, okay, that's not inconsistent, but he should only do this occasionally because his pain is that high. So it's all still based on objective data. You're putting in exactly what you see, exactly how long they're able to do it, what their heart rate is, what their pain score is, but the software is doing the scoring for you. So that really relieves you of any difficulty or opinion-based reporting when it comes to what can this person do safely. Any questions before I move out of this about the scoring or about how to do any of this stuff?
So Justin, I know with the old software that if you did not mark under quality performance, severe deviations, anything under that would kind of come up and factor in at the end when you had self-limiting for the
Yep.
overall calculation. Is that still going to do the same thing with the web-based?
Still the same thing. So we've changed the terminology a little bit. It's client willingness now, but it's the same verbiage here:
Gotcha.
appropriate, overextending, or self-limiting.
Okay.
For those of you not familiar with that, for every task you do, you have to rate their willingness. So appropriate would just be either they went through the whole test, they went through the whole test. In this case, they did the whole 5 minutes of squatting. If they do the whole 5 minutes, then it's appropriate. You know, they're fine. You didn't stop them on purpose. If on the other hand, let's say we get to 2 minutes, but you weren't seeing, we'll change a few of the things here as well. So you get to 2 minutes of testing. Their pain didn't get really bad. Their body mechanics look normal. But they don't want to go on. You know, as the clinician, I would say, okay, so you're asking me to stop at 2 minutes, but your heart rate's not high. Your body mechanics look fine. Is there a reason that you can't continue? And if they just say, oh yeah, just because I don't feel like I can, or my leg's getting weak or something like that, that would be a self-limiting task. Now, that doesn't necessarily change what their ability level is, because you're not stopping them because of body mechanics or anything like that. You're just saying that they were unwilling to continue that task. So this will all come out at the end of the test, and the client willingness plays into the consistency of effort scoring at the end of the test, just like it used to. If they self-limit, obviously you have to put a reason for self-limiting. You know, maybe we'll say this person had a fear of re-injury, which again, that does not mean that they're lying. I've had a couple of rotator cuff surgeries, and you know, for the first several months after my last surgery, if I was doing anything overhead, I was pretty apprehensive about it. So it might just be this person is legitimately scared about doing that task, not cheating or lying. They just don't want to do it. So you need to write in, you know, if they said anything about it, I'm just afraid that I'm going to hurt my knee again or my back, whatever the case might be. We try to put plenty of space in here that you can write your comments in to either justify what was going on, or you know, if you write in there, you know, I couldn't see any biomechanical breakdown, don't know exactly why they stopped, they just felt like they needed to stop. So yes, that information is included at the end, and it comes out in the consistency of effort scoring. Okay, so what Christian was saying was, if I try to close that task and it's still showing normal limits, but I haven't gone to the full time tolerated, it says you have to change something in here, because that doesn't make sense. You wouldn't stop the task if nothing else was going on. So we could take out any of those things. And then we can save it. So you're saying that your test has to agree. And again, that just takes out the possibility that you write conflicting information in the software. So it just kind of keeps you safe from that. And that's the same with the position tolerance, with the mobility, anything that where you're entering data, it makes sure that it agrees before it lets you exit out of that specific task. Any other questions about data entry into the software? You can see that there's several different tabs up here. The initial tasks, that has to do with the 3 tasks that we do for endurance testing. We would do what we consider to be the 3 most physically challenging tasks at the very beginning of the test. And then as you go through your whole testing protocol, do the dynamic strength, position tolerance, mobility. And then when you're ready to complete the test, you'd go over to your endurance, and you can see it's those same 3 tasks again. The way the software does the scoring on endurance, whether it's safe for that person to do this for a 40-hour work week, is it compares their performance at the end of the test to their performance at the beginning of the test. And if there has been a significant degradation in abilities, then that's when it says it's probably not safe for this person to go back and do that at a 40-hour week yet. You need to look at, either accommodations or work conditioning, something like that. Typically a conversation that you would have with the employer or the referral source, to say it's probably not good for them to go back to full duty yet. Or most times it will say, yes, it looks like this person can go back because the performance here was not much different than it was at the beginning. The things that it would look at the end of the test is for below the waist lifting, if the weight they were able to handle was significantly less than it was at the beginning. For climbing stairs or repetitive squat, it would look at, did their heart rate get significantly higher at the end of the test? And did it take them significantly longer to perform the task than it did at the beginning? So it takes all of that information and gives its determination. Once you get done with all of the tasks that you want to do, you just move to the summary screen, and that's where you're able to put in any final information that you feel like might impact the results of the test. So you would write down if there were any functional inconsistencies, and those would be things like, at the very beginning of the test, when I was doing just a musculoskeletal screen, the patient couldn't bend at the waist, but then their phone rang during the test and they bent over and picked it up. Those things that to look for as a clinician. So you could write those in there. Testing inconsistencies is more things that the software finds scoring wise that might be inconsistent. And so some of those would be, if let's say the waist to eye level lift, if they were able to handle more weight doing the waist to eye level lift than they were from floor to waist, that's not typical, right? Most people can lift more from floor to waist than they can from waist to eye level. And so if that were the case, it would show up on testing inconsistencies. Now, again, let me reemphasize, does not mean that the person is cheating or lying. There could be a really good reason for it. Maybe they have a bum knee from a previous injury, and so they can't squat very well, or maybe they have really bad balance and there's nothing wrong with their upper extremity, so they can lift more from waist to eye level than they can from floor to waist. You can write that in, again, because it's a Word document. You can put that in there saying, this showed up as a testing inconsistency, but this is why that makes sense for this person. So the software is just finding things that are atypical. You can put in there whether or not it made sense for this patient. You can write in any specific observations about pain statements or pain behaviors that they might have exhibited. Interpretation, you can put in here, what were the main limiting factors? Was it flexibility? Their range of motion still isn't very good, a specific muscle group that's not working well, whatever the case might be. You can put any of the general ones, or if you hit other, it gives you a space that you can type in. You can put in recommendations. I would caution you first, before you ever put in written recommendations in the FCE, talk to the referral source first to see if they want recommendations. In my experience, most times they do not want written recommendations. That's typically something that they would just, you could have a phone conversation with. Most people do not want written recommendations. And then the final screen is just a little bit of wrap up information. Any changes in musculoskeletal measures, if you decide to do that between the beginning of N, What is their pain score at the end of the test? Was their gait pattern significantly different after the test than it was before the test? And then if the client had anything to say, parting shot about the testing or anything, you could write that in. You would then go to reports, and instead of generating another report on this individual, I'm going to stop share again, and I'll just bring up the report that comes up with it. While I'm bringing that up, any questions? Wow, quiet group.
Justin, it really looks just like the on location based
Yeah,
software.
yeah,
Very, very,
very
very
similar.
user easy. Yeah. Very
And
easy to
we
implement.
tried to keep it that way just because we knew there are people out there that have been using it for a long time, and it even at the very end we didn't get anybody, and I hope that it wasn't just people being quiet, but we really didn't have people reaching out saying we don't like how this software flows or this is hard to use. I've talked to hundreds of people who have used it, and I used it for a really long time before I came to work for ErgoScience.
Right.
So we never had anybody come and say this doesn't flow well. So we tried to keep the main functionality pretty much as it was beforehand.
Well, I really appreciate it being
We did it
web-based
just for
now.
you, Christian.
Thank you.
Thinking of you.
It's just here lately, no matter what computer we buy, there's always a bug or something like that. And
Why did that not come up?
even having to store all
Yeah,
this on servers,
exactly.
so definitely makes it easy from an overhead position as well.
There we go. Okay, so this is what the report comes. Now, this one, this has not been edited at all. I've not put any edits in there. This is just how it comes out when you hit the report button on the FCE software. This is what comes out. So the first page in the software, and the report has changed a little bit. So the first page on the report is just kind of like a cover sheet. You're sending this over to a physician's office or to a case manager. This just lets them know who are we talking about here. After consultation with several work comp docs and some surgeons, they said the first thing that we want to see is, can this person go back to work? And so we put the summary of performance on the second page. And this is just a job match table. So basically, these are all the tests that were tested. This is what the client is able to do. This is what the job demand was. And is it a match? So a physician can look at this, and if there's any red in this table, then they know, okay, there are at least some aspects of this job that this person cannot do yet. So there needs to be some decision making there. This is just percentage wise, how much can they do versus how much they can't do. The next page is more similar to what the first page was in the old report. Client effort, like did they self-limit or did they give a full effort? What is their overall level of work for this gentleman? And they had a safe level of work at medium. And again, that's based on the Dictionary of Occupational Titles. Sedentary, light, medium, heavy, very heavy. And what is their work tolerance? And this one says that he can do the medium level of work on a full-time basis. This is just obviously a little bit of summary of medical history, and it will give information. If you have medications that you put in for this person, they'll show up here. Any interesting things that they said, any rest breaks that they took, you can put that in here. And if you've typed them in during the report, it will obviously populate here. You don't have to populate this afterwards. But like I said before, that's just a Word document. You can type in there if you want to. One of the things that I ended up putting into a lot of my FCEs, I had frequent requests for doing impairment ratings along with my FCEs. So typically somewhere right before my signature, I would drop in that impairment rating information as well, and then send that to the referral source. The rest of the report really is just history for you. So if you're like me and you've done FCEs for a long time, I have had case managers call me and say, hey, do you remember that FCE that you did on obscure person 5 years ago? You're like, no, I have no idea who that is or when I did that, but I can go back in and I can find the report and pull it up, and this will tell me exactly what I did with that person with every single task. So how much weight they lifted, how long it took them to do it, what kind of pain were they in, what was their heart rate, why did I stop them, or why did they choose to stop? It gives you all of that detailed information, so you should be able to answer any question they have about the testing. It tells you what self-limiting behavior they had. So if the person stopped their own test, that would show up here. This person didn't, but it would show up there if they did. Any inconsistencies. So anything you wanted to know about this FCE test, it would come back to you here. So you don't have to have like an elephant's memory to be able to bring all that information back. You just go in and you find your test and say, yeah, this is what you needed to know. Same thing with consistency of effort testing stuff. It's all in here. And then we decided to put in, because we had case managers and adjusters ask about it, just a little bit of definitions here, work levels, the frequency table according to the Dictionary of Occupational Titles, even some dexterity information that you very rarely need to know, but we decided to put it in there. Just a bunch of definitions, so they shouldn't need to be calling you to say, what does this mean? What does that mean? And then finally, there's just kind of a bibliography. This is just the research that went into doing the test and some of the published stuff afterwards about the ErgoScience specific FCE testing. So the look of the report has changed a little bit. The information that is contained in it has changed a little bit, mostly the same. We tried to make it prettier. And we have had one clinic that said, well, we don't really like the new setup. We like the old one better. But they said, all we do is it's a Word document. So we just copy the table and move it to the second page, and we bring the other stuff back up to the first page. So one of the next things that we do with the software, we're going to try to make the report a little bit more modular to where it would be easier and less playing around with formatting to move things from one place to another. Surprisingly, when we've spoken with our programmer, he said that is much more difficult than actually programming like the scoring algorithms in the software. Who would have known? Not me, not Joshua. So anyways, that is one thing that we hope to be working on in the future, to make it easy to move stuff from one place to another. But that will be coming sometime in the future. All right. Kind of go back to this. We already talked about endurance testing, how it's done. We take the 3 most physically demanding tasks. We do those at the beginning, repeat them again at the end. The software compares that for you, and so you don't have to make a determination. The software does. The big selling point for our physicians and for the case managers, and hopefully for our physical therapists, is that the scoring protocol, it gives you all the information that you need. So it gives you safe weight handling abilities. It will give you frequency tolerances for each position and mobility task. It will give you an overall level of work for everything combined. It'll let you know whether or not the person can do that for a full day, and it will tell you whether or not they were giving a consistent effort throughout the test. So pretty much anything that a case manager, physician, employer would want to know, it comes out in the scoring. And again, it's all objective scoring. It is not your opinion that is making this recommendation. One of the things that I mentioned about report writing when I was doing these previously, prior to getting the ErgoScience software at one of the other companies where I worked, the report writing took me about 4 hours to do. As a clinic owner, I looked at that 4 hours as that's either a whole bunch of patients that I could have seen and generated more revenue, or that was time at home that I could have been spending with my children, but instead I was writing a boring FCE report. When I went and did the training for ErgoScience, and they mentioned, and the report should be ready in 15 to 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes if it's a really complex FCE, that's about when I started shedding tears, because it just saves so much time. And besides, the report looks so much better than what I was putting together. But just the time saving was a game changer for me. And it really helped me become more profitable as a clinic owner, because I wasn't wasting time doing, writing a report that I wasn't getting money for. The report that comes out, we tried to keep it concise. All of the relevant information is there at the beginning for the people who want to read it. Nothing is opinion, or I feel like, or I think that. And so it keeps you safe should you ever, have to go to court for anything like that, or if anybody ever has questions. We already looked at the report. I won't go over that again. This is just a couple of things that people have told us about the FCE software in general and about the scoring protocol. Not that we want to really pat ourselves on the back, but we do feel like we have a good product with people that have been using it for a really long time. We've had people that have used it, went to a company that didn't use our software, and then begged the company to switch to our software because it was more efficient, easier to use, easier to navigate. And the company's made the switch. So we feel like we have a great product. We try to listen to our clinicians and make changes that are appropriate so it stays up to date. If anybody has any questions, if they want references, we can provide those as well. So what we feel like are the benefits to our FCE system, it's research-based. And as far as I know, it's still the only research-based one out there. I think a lot of the other ones, they're now based on, well, we have this much, 20 years of anecdotal evidence that it works. And that's great, but it's still anecdotal evidence. We don't think that there are any others out there that are university research-based. All the information in it is objective. It's not your opinion. It's defensible, never illegal, never a successful legal challenge in the past 30 years. The software is really easy to use. The report comes out quickly. You can do lots of different things with it. I encourage anybody who uses it, make use of those other things, do the return to work testing. It's a great value add for your clinic, can make you a lot more profitable. And it's typically, when you're doing those return to work tests, it's easy profit generation. We don't use any special machines for our testing. Everything is stuff that's typically already in your clinic, or if not, it's not specific to us. It's just a lifting station, ladder, some stairs, whatever the case might be, but no machines are involved in our testing. And then one of the other benefits is that when you buy the software, you're automatically included in the ErgoScience network. We get requests across the country from insurance companies looking for clinics to perform FCEs for them. I won't name any names, but some of the very large insurance companies that, if you deal in work comp, you've dealt with these companies before, or if you've done any type of disability stuff, some of them contact us as well. And they just say, look, we need an FCE in this part of the country. And so we go to our ErgoScience network of clinics and say, hey, would you be willing to do an FCE within this time frame? So that's just one of the other benefits from doing our software. All right, so one of the changes from the old software, it was just on a per clinic basis. So you would renew it annually for your clinic. It was the same cost. You would install it on a computer there, and it didn't really change. And over the last several years, we've gone up on the price a little bit for the renewal fees. Certainly not kept up with inflation, but we have increased it a little bit. We have changed the pricing for the cloud software. It's now a monthly subscription plan. So if you are just one user in one clinic, then that would be $70 a month to use the software. If you have more than one person, and this is a clinic group, this is not just in one physical facility, but in a clinic group, if you have more than one user, so anywhere between 2 and 10 users, that would drop the per month fee to $60 per month per user. If you are a large clinic group, and you have more than 11 users, that would drop it to $40 per month per user. the way we have it set up is that if you can pay for it on a monthly basis, it's just recurring monthly. If you choose to pay for it on an annual basis, because it makes it easier for us and for our accounting group, then we give you a month free. So everybody in your organization would get 1 month free. So for instance, if you are the only person in your company that does them, it's $70 a month. But if you pay for a full year, you get a month free. So it ends up being $770. If you have more than two people using it, it would be $660 per person because we give you a month free, so on and so forth. You can do the math. So the pricing structure is a little bit different. We still feel like it's very competitive, and when compared with some of the other competitors out there, we're still way below what others are charging for their FCE software. The online training is on demand. Once you sign up for the training, you have 90 days to complete it. That costs $870. Right now, it's worth 18.75 CEUs. So depending on what state you're in, that might knock out, 2 years worth of your CEUs. It just depends on your state. There is a license fee, a one-time license fee. This is not yearly. If you're a new clinic group with nobody that has ever used our software before, it's $500 to purchase the software. If you're an existing ErgoScience clinic, then there's a one-time $300 upgrade fee for the new software. But that's not yearly. That's just a one-time fee. And then it's just subscription costs after that. If you're a large clinic group and you have multiple clinics that are using the software, it's $300 for the first clinic and then $150 for any additional clinic. And again, one-time fee. After the first year, it's just the recurring subscription cost. And with that, the end of the presentation. What questions are out there? I'm not on a time crunch here, so I'm happy to answer any questions you have, either about the software, about FCEs in general, work comp questions, whatever the case might be.
Hey, Justin, Christian. I know for us, the number of referrals for FCEs and stuff like that is dropping.
Right.
So I know that at one point you guys had toyed with the idea of just doing a like per FCE charge for it. Did you guys decide to go away from that?
We don't do a per FCE charge. We do offer, I guess it would be a smaller package where we just do a specified number of tests.
Gotcha.
And what we decided to go with was 12 tests over for 1 year, and that would be for $600. And then when you use those up, you would purchase like another 12 of them.
Okay.
I think we've had one person go with that as a small clinic in Hawaii, and they have no ability to expand their referral base. They're not going to get people from the mainland to come do FCEs at their clinic.
Right.
There's not a lot of difference between that package group of them and paying for one person for the year.
Right.
And in all honesty, most states charge, you're able to recoup, somewhere in the realm of $800 to $1,000 for an FCE. So it only takes a couple of FCEs per year to pay for the whole price of the product. Now, obviously, nobody wants to break even on it. If you're paying, $770 for use of the software and you do one FCE for $770, like, you really haven't gained much.
Right.
But we tried to price it such that even if you did one or two FCEs during the year, you would pay for the software.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions at all?
Hey, Josh. Hi, this is Catherine.
Hey,
I think I'm that one person from Hawaii.
no, you're not, because I know his
Okay.
name, but if you are from Hawaii, I'll talk to you.
Yeah. So who do we get a hold of to get it up and running?
That would be me.
Okay.
So yeah, so we have your email address. If you signed up for the webinar, everybody will get, and by the way, everybody will get a link to a recording of the webinar afterwards. but if you're interested, Catherine, then I can send you some information afterwards, and we can just kind of go back and forth and figure out how you want to do it.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Perfect. Ms. Tapley, I know that I've emailed with you a couple of times, and I don't remember off the top of my head what that was about, but if you have any questions, just let me know. Any other questions?
Yeah, this Kaz. I don't have any questions right now.
Oh, very
I'll-
good.
I'll be getting in touch, so.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, if anybody does have questions later on, you've got our email address here. Send those to info@ergoscience.com, and that comes to Joshua and myself. And if you guys have done our FCEs before, you've probably spoken with Nancy. Nancy Hughes does all of our QA for our FCE software. She also helps people, especially people who are kind of new at writing FCEs or performing them. She'll kind of give some pointers, and you can give your report to her when you finish. And she might give you a little information saying it might be better worded like this, or here's something you might do. So she is a encyclopedia of information. So we all get that email. So any questions you have, send it to that info email address, and somebody will get back to you really quickly. Hopefully we hear from you. We're very confident in our software. We feel like it's benefited a lot of people, and we'd like to get it out there to as many people as possible. So we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it, Justin. Thanks a lot.